Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner, AFRI. AFRI is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it. Today we have a new story and an amazing storyteller and also a book author. It's a big pleasure to welcome you, Professor Lars Marcus, Urbanistica podcast. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful to be invited. It's very looking forward to this talk.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, but I came home from the United States just a couple of days ago, so I'm a bit confused maybe, both from traveling, but also from all the big things happening over there. So it was a very strange thing to visit.
Yeah. And you were there to promote your new book.
Yes, so that was also very exciting, and I had the opportunity to talk about it at some of these big, well-known universities. So
Yeah.
we went from MIT to Columbia University and also to Yale University. I didn't speak in these great auditoriums. It was a little bit smaller circles, but still very, very exciting.
Yeah. Interesting. And I love your book, and I want to explore it together with you.
Thank you. That's looking forward to it.
Yeah. Tell me first the background of you writing this book. What is the background?
Well, the background is that I've decided already 10 years ago to try to synthesize all the different research projects that we were doing. Because in the academic world, it's rather difficult to get money and fund these syntheses of what you do. So it easily fragments into very different projects that can become very different to overlook.
Mm.
But I think I've had an idea about what these different projects really, how they fit into each other from very far back.
Okay.
But so I decided already 10 years ago to try to start to write it. So it's really taken 10 years, but of course with lots of breaks in it. But I'm very happy to do that because I think it's very unusual.
But 10 years is a lot of time for a book, no? Or?
It's a lot of time, but of course I didn't work full time all the time.
Yeah, but like still, it's interesting that you kept the energy and idea going for 10 years, like going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah,
You didn't give up on the book.
no, that's right. But I think that's the story I've always have wanted to tell, rather than these small fragments. That how all of this fits together, and that our field that we talk much about here, urban development, urban planning, urban design, is such an essential dimension of most things that happen, not only in our private lives, in everyday life, but also in the larger society and so forth. And I think generally that it has become underestimated now in our time of high tech and so forth, and its central role. So that's the story I really wanted to tell.
Yeah. And for me, I work as a practitioner, not so much in academia. But now you mentioned like there's not so much funding when it comes to this kind of project. At the same time, there are like millions of dollars investing in like city planning projects. So how come that?
I find that very strange too, because one thing that I very late in my academic career has found out is that the wealth created by humanity, really, global wealth, constitutes 2/3 of global wealth is real estate values.
Okay.
And maybe even more, 4/5 or something like that. So it's, as you say, it's the most where most money is traveling.
Yeah.
But we don't develop the deeper knowledge about what it really happens, what it does, what the differences are, and so forth. So I find it very strange too.
Is it because like it takes a lot of time to produce something within academia, and they don't
we don't gain money as soon as possible as when we build the building and sell it or rent it. Maybe I'm just like
No, but
thinking loud.
yeah, well, let's try. Let's try to discuss this. This is difficult to understand, and I do think that the practice side is very important in enlightening this. And I think it could be very good also from practice side to start to really
Yeah.
demand more
Mm.
fundamental knowledge in the field, so
Mm.
that we can produce very, very good things, because they will be there for very long. And what I try to show in the book is that it influences more or less everything that happens in society. So that's very important. But I think there's many things. I mean, the built environment, if we call that, the
Yeah.
kind of the physical object that
Mm.
in the end we have before us.
Yeah.
I think that it's multifunctional, and that's something we easily agree upon. But it's extremely multifunctional. So it does so many things, anything
Mm.
from aesthetics to real concrete construction and so forth.
Yeah.
So there are so many different fields that needs to be engaged in this object. And moreover, it's not a typical engineering product where you can really define the problems in detail. It's kind of vague.
Yeah.
So I like to talk about it as a form of technology.
Mm.
Most architects and maybe even urban designers and so forth are not so fond of that. But the point I'm trying to make is that currently we're stuck in a very narrow definition of technology that goes into high tech and
Exactly. Softwares and programming.
Exactly, and even certain things that you can do analytic and quantitative analysis of. And then but the built environment is a different form of technology. And what I also found out late is that if you go to archaeologists or anthropologists and so forth, they typically talk about technology as a much broader field and define what we talk about as technology today as a very, very narrow thing.
Okay.
Which is, different kinds of implements and high-speed instruments and that high tech, really. But the built environment is a different type of technology. They would call it a technology, and they would call it facilities. And we recognize that word, right? Facilities.
Yeah.
But it's a different type of problem. And it's not emphasized in the same manner.
Yeah.
But I do think that type of technology is becoming increasingly important in this time of sustainability debate and so forth, because it's kind of low tech, but it's very long lasting.
And also impactful.
Yes, exactly. And low energy, low everything, except from construction, but and so forth. So that's one reason, but there's probably others.
But this is first time, to be honest. Even if I say within only this platform interviewed like more than 600 people, this first time I hear that the built environment and city making is technology, because usually we just think about devices and other sector.
Yeah, but I think and I understand, because it's also have all kinds of environmental and aesthetic dimensions and so forth that is very important. So it just shows how broad this field is.
Yeah.
But I think the thing is that we use buildings to help us do something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so in that sense, it's in a very basic sense, it's a kind of technology.
Exactly.
But I'm not saying that it should become high tech. I'm saying that we should acknowledge this field of technology.
It is technology, yeah.
And I would love to go to the head of our university, Chalmers University of Technology, and say, hey, this is a new field of technology. Why don't we go here and put a lot of money into this? Because I think really it's would be forward-looking and highly relevant for the problems we're facing.
And this is usually I highlight in our projects. I talk with my colleagues. I tell them, we do such an impactful work. We use a lot of resources, like from the Mother Earth, but also like we impact people's lives so much.
Exactly, yeah.
But we still maybe sometimes we don't understand like the value of how much impact we make.
No.
So that's also
that's
one
the
aspect.
First from my book. The first line is that we learn. You're often told that we should look beyond our noses, but we all know that the difficult thing to really get a good look at is our noses. And I think that the built environment is such a nose.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go back to the book, and you talk about spatial capital. How do you define it? What is it?
Yeah, that's trying to put the built environment in a different context so that one could start to think about it in a different way. And that a good way is try to put it in an economic context, right?
Mm.
And I think it is um, exactly that. It's a form of capital. But then capital, all these words are very, they're so difficult to mean so many things. But originally, back in the days of Adam Smith and the beginning of economic theory and so forth, um, one talked about capital very much as a kind of embodied labor. It was rather tools and machines that were considered capital,
Okay.
rather than money and finance and all of investments and all of that. So, in that sense, all kinds of technology, in that sense, is a form of embodied labor. We don't only work as humans to try to create something. At times, we stop and try to make tools that
Mm.
make our work more efficient in the
Mm.
future, that
Mm.
can accelerate our production.
Yeah.
And this is obvious from all kinds of machines and tools, and also the new digital tools, AI,
Mm.
everything. But we don't see it in the built environment,
Yeah.
which is the most fundamental tool, machine,
Yeah.
technology that supports all of the others.
Mm.
And as you say, we don't really acknowledge that. It's kind of a background to everything else,
Yeah.
and that we want to be nice and comfortable and everything. But it's productive. It's a means of production.
Mm.
Because we know, when we make mistakes in urban planning,
Mm.
it costs a lot.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to change, and it stops a lot of the processes in society, social, economic, ecological, not least.
Mm.
Whereas if we get it right, it starts to support all of
Yeah.
these systems, start
Mm.
running in the way that we would like.
Mm.
So in that sense, I talk about as a spatial capital, in the sense that it's a particular form of such tools and machines that is tied to land,
Mm.
and so therefore it's kind of spatial. There's more about this in the book, but briefly. So the idea is not to get stuck too much about thinking money when I say capital,
Okay.
but to start to think about it as a tool, a machine.
Mm. Mm.
Capitalism is capitalism for two reasons. On the one hand, is obviously for a particular form of economic system,
Yeah.
but it's also the reliance on technology. So I think it's good to have these both dimensions to it.
Mm.
And in the latter sense, the built environment is an absolutely essential part.
Yeah. So how does like this spatial capital contribute or enhance the other capitals, that the
Now,
ecological or social in cities?
yes, and you already touched on it by in the sense that it structures our everyday life. So it
Mm.
kind of sets us in a position, this structure of Stockholm positions everyone in a particular relation to everybody else in the all of Stockholm.
True.
And it's a fundamental first, so where we live or where we work, where we tend to move and not,
Yeah.
and so forth. It creates a certain pattern of movements in
Mm.
cities that are absolutely fundamental for, so that structures our everyday lives in
Yeah.
that sense.
Yeah.
But of course, the pattern of that also supports and gives structure to social processes like social segregation and these immense problems of that. It structures, of course, you can just see what the land rents are in different parts of the city. It differs and has a lot with location,
Exactly.
location, right? And what is location? Well, it's the built environment that creates
Mm.
location.
Mm.
And also, of course, when it comes to ecosystems, where often the built environment disturbs ecosystems, but it could also be made to support them. So we also get more of the positive effects of ecosystem services and so forth. So in that sense, it's a fundamental production factor for all of these
Mm.
key systems in society. But at the moment, we don't take care of it the way we should, I think,
Mm.
to make this support. And then we try to fix things
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
other
Yeah.
end, so to speak.
Instead of fixing the structure, the ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
The question is why we don't care so much, or we don't see the value of our spatial capital. Is because it takes long time and we don't have the
Yes, and then
or
it's also but then it becomes even more complicated. The spatial capital sense, we have a tendency. The built environment is a mix. Okay, let's go back to
yeah.
there is normally three production factors that one has been talking about since
Mhm.
Adam Smith's day and so forth, and
Okay.
that is labor, land, and capital. And
Okay.
capital then very much as a technology.
Mm.
Uh, and the built environment is a strange mix of capital and land, because obviously it's land, but at the same time, the building is considered capital.
Yeah.
And the building is what we see.
Mm.
And the land often has to do with location.
Mm.
And location is difficult to point at,
Exactly.
right?
Mm.
But the building is possible to point at. So we often think that your value is created by the building when we create real estate.
Yeah.
But it's the majority of the value in any bigger city is location.
Comes
It's
from the land.
exactly,
Mm.
and very much of location is created by planning,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
the structure, location, or where we put the schools,
Mm.
the
Mm.
public transport, the parks, and everything.
Yeah.
So and so it's easily shown by saying that if we build the same building in, let's say, Gällivare, Uppsala, and Stockholm,
Mm.
the value of that building will be very, very different.
Exactly.
Has changed? Well, the location, and also if you have
Mm.
if you build something in different parts of Stockholm,
Yeah.
the exact same building will have different
Different
value.
values. I noticed that because I just bought the new flat, and I saw the difference in the prices, and it's huge difference between, let's say, downtown city and the edge of Stockholm.
Mm,
Like it's triple or more the
mm,
prices, and it's so crazy. And even if it's a new production or a new building in the edge of Stockholm,
mm.
but still so lower than the oldest building or the
Absolutely, yeah, I understand.
Mm.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly it. And so, but location is difficult to see, and often also it's the public planning often that is doing this. So
Yeah.
it's kind of downvalued, and what you see is the building. You see
Mm.
the Karlavagnstornet in Gothenburg, and you think that's
Mm.
the investment.
Yeah.
No, the investment is the whole planning of that part of
It's the
Gothenburg
hidden
going on.
part.
Yes, and that's difficult to point at.
Mm.
And I even think that since it often is the public planning
Yeah.
offices that do this, they're very bad at pointing out this themselves. They
Mm.
think they cost money, whereas they actually create most of
A
the money.
huge amount of money later.
Another one, just to show this, is to say that the bigger the city,
Mm.
the larger part of the real estate value is made up of location and much lesser the building.
Ah.
It's easy to think about this in a big city, like if you're in Manhattan, which I
Yeah.
happen to be. It's obvious that you have very little land,
Yeah.
but very many buildings.
True.
A lot of floor space, but very little land. So of course, there will be the demand for land. That's the important thing, not
Yeah.
another building, because there are lots of buildings
Mm.
there. Whereas if you go in a rural area, there's a lot of land, and if there happens to be a building on one piece of land,
Yeah.
that will be the expensive one, right?
Exactly.
So you see these, and that's the reason why you can tear down a building that's 15 floors high in central
Mm.
London and build one, if you're allowed to build one 18 floors, because
Exactly.
it's worth it. The building is such a small part of
Yeah.
the whole thing.
Exactly. So I want to elaborate on an idea with you. Does it mean that because usually some part of the city, the land is very expensive, location, location, location. Does it mean that we cannot create a new valuable location or no?
Yes, we can. This famous saying of Mark Twain. It's like Oscar Wilde. They say that, I don't know if they said all these things, but he supposedly said that something like "Buy land, son. They're not making it anymore." But we are making creating
Yeah,
location, and creation is exactly what you do at the planning offices and something sometimes as consultant.
yeah,
And so there is a huge amount of value created in that side of urban development,
mm,
and often the major part of the value, but we are not acknowledging this. And you could have all kinds of theories why we're not, but
Mm.
I think it's important to start to do that also to make all the planning offices in Swedish municipalities straight in the back and say, come on, we're creating the values
Yeah.
here, and not only monetary value, of course, all these other
Mm.
use values
The
in
bigger
so
pictures. Yeah.
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 So one thing is that we should, to simplify it also,
Yeah.
we should look much more on the street network than the
Mm.
buildings,
Because of.
because it's what creates location. It's
Mm.
what ties everything together. And how we tie this together is very important in creating locations. Something less disturbed areas, more central areas,
Mm.
and so forth. It's the street network, in simple terms,
Yeah.
that creates the connections.
And contribute to the value.
Yes, by creating location. So location can be two things too. Also,
Yeah.
on one hand, is just how close, by the help of the street network, am I to other resources surrounding my plot
Yeah.
of land.
Mm.
So if you have a lot of resources, like if it's close to Times Square, obviously my little piece, even though it's not Times Square,
Mm.
can draw effects from
Yeah.
Times Square. But of course, it could also be that you could start to develop different attractions. And sometimes real estate owners go together and try to market like a street
Yeah.
or something by adding kind of attractions. And that's exactly by raising real estate values, because the real estate values that you can raise within your own plot of land is rather small. But if you go together as a neighborhood, you can do
Exactly.
that. But more essential than these attractions, because they may come and go and and just may be successful or
Yeah.
not, is that you create a location by being close to other things
Mm.
through the street network. So this street network, which public space in general,
Yeah.
it can be parks and squares and
Yeah.
all kinds of things, is the thing that really is creating value. But I think we often overlook that and see it only as a kind of service system.
Like a secondary.
Exactly. Whereas the building is what we see. And
The
that's not.
landmark.
Yeah, exactly.
But is it because like architects were very powerful like through the history, so they just dominated over all other professions like urban planning, urban design, because the architects or the buildings is the icon, and this is the first thing we look at, and we forget about everything else.
Mm.
Could
Well,
it be something
yeah,
theory?
I guess it may be emphasized, and we kind of very fond of the architectural object, the individual building. And of course, that's a very important task. But as we're starting to point out here, is that what that building really is has so much to do where it's
With the
located,
surroundings.
its location, and what's close to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's depending on where you put the building, is not only that it has an effect on the value of the building, it actually becomes a different building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, no?
Yeah, it's kind of systems, system thinking, or where we love that in all other cases, right?
Yeah.
So we say that, the whole is not just the addition of the parts. And also the opposite, where we can say that we don't really know what the part is
Yeah.
if we don't understand where its location in the bigger system. And all of these, yes. But when it comes to our own field, we kind of stuck on the building anyway. And it's strange, because in all other disciplines, architecture means exactly this, how things are related to each other. If you go to computer science or whatever, the system, that's what they call the architecture of things. But I don't know, we're not so fond of using it in that. I don't know.
That's so true. That's so true. So like, what is the mission of the book? What do you want planning departments in the city to do? Do you want them to take more money from the land developers, or?
Yeah, actually, yes. I think that in a negotiation situation, that's difficult to say. That's I think one should be more stronger, see how important one is in the contribution to the development.
Okay.
And also, I think if you have good planning, you could create sustainability in the values also for the real estate owners, rather than quick fixes where you get them and get. So in that sense, I think it's a strength strengthening that.
Mm.
But in a more principle level, I think uh, I know that she's used so much, people are getting tired of it. But I
But
think the most important thing that Jane Jacobs said
yeah.
was that she had this really tough question already in 1961,
Mm.
and it goes like something like, why haven't the people responsible for the development of our cities understood what kind of a problem they are dealing with?
Mm.
And that must have hurt. Because what is she saying? What she's saying?
Yeah.
We will
Yeah.
understand what we. And then, 3 lines below that, she says, cities are problems of disorganized complexity. And actually, Jane Jacobs was the first person that pointed out cities as complex systems. She was so ahead of everybody. So
Sure.
all the planners at the time didn't know what she was talking about.
No.
Problem is that we are still not, acknowledging this. So, but
Uh,
so this is kind of part
yeah.
of it. What we talk about now is the relations and accepting cities as acknowledging
Yeah.
cities as a system. A system is such a boring word, so most people, oh God. But we could call it a landscape. We could
Mm.
call it architecture. Just
Mm.
if we
Mm.
want, what is the architecture? Because I think when you're working with a building, you're very concerned with how the different
Yeah.
rooms are related to each other.
Mm.
Obviously, you're
Mm. Mm.
building an architectural piece here. And the city also have to have that kind of idea about how things are related to
Yeah.
each other. Otherwise, you are bound to make mistakes
Mm. Mm.
because you're treating it what in scientific words could be called a simple system, where you just can add something anywhere
Mm.
and it will not be influenced by the surroundings. And what you're adding is not influencing the surroundings.
Okay.
And that's not how it
No,
works.
not in our case. No.
No.
We wish.
Yes. Yes. No, but no,
Yeah.
you have a piece of land and let's develop that.
Yeah.
And you have all kinds of ideas and promises that you give about what is. But you have maybe not understood what the surrounding city is
Mm.
already doing, where you need to fit your piece into that
Yeah.
if it's going to work.
Mm.
And maybe your idea is actually you're trying to implement it in the wrong location.
Yeah.
And this is the planning office responsibility to say, well, you want to do this
Exactly.
and you have this piece of land. It's not going to work here, but we could work over here. And in your
Mm.
piece of land, we should instead do this. Because it's not like, oh, it's just politics. It's actually the engineering part, It
Also,
will not work. And we have so many examples
a
of
lot
that.
of cases, a lot
Mm.
of cases. But because as you mentioned, recent decades, a lot, maybe more politics took over the planning decisions instead of we look at it from more like technical or technology perspective. That's why many parts of the city is not working.
Yeah, I mean, there's two levels.
Yeah.
First, we need to understand how the city really works, and this is Jane Jacobs'
Mm.
question. Why haven't you have to look at it as a complex system, and
Yeah.
it has certain qualities as a complex system that you have to realize. Then, of course, and then to where things may fit in, on what you need to do to get the effects that you're looking for, and so forth.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more complicated than just building an individual piece somewhere and
Mm.
then hoping that it will work. So that's it. That's one level. But the next level is, of course, that all of this is also political,
Yeah.
deeply political. And because what we see now, for instance, is how we are trying to change our cities into something else. Both in the sense that maybe in Gothenburg, for instance, is still very much an industrial structure.
Yeah.
It's a structure of the 20th century.
Mm.
Both the industrial economy, but also the welfare state, where everything was, supposedly possible to solve in certain housing neighborhoods, and and now we don't have that. The services are closing, and all kinds of.
Yeah.
So on that level, it's a political, but it can also. I do really think that it could reflect even more ideological ideas about how society works, and what you
Yeah.
want to support and
Yeah.
what you don't want to support, and
Mm.
so forth. But that demands a more, deeper inquiry. But so I'm not saying that it's only a technological product, an objective or neutral, but it's deeply
Also,
political.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
But most technology is so it's
Yeah.
Mm.
Professor, you know more than me. We have a lot of books, handbooks, policies, and so on when it comes to making cities, strategies, concept, and so on. But we still make a lot of mistakes when it comes to city planning and designing. why we are not learning from the past.
No, and I do think, without risking in these times to sound conservative, which I don't think I am, but there is a lot to learn from history in that, because
Yeah.
I think we underestimate the fantastic construction that cities have been traditionally. And we simplify them and think that, simple patterns and they're too dense and noisy and so forth. But they are doing a lot of work we could learn of. And we really haven't disclosed that complexity in how these, rather as a form, rather simple things
Yeah.
do so many things so effectively. But that's one dimension of it. So we could learn there, because I do really think that they address they address urban systems, the social dimension and economic dimension. So as uh, complex systems without them really knowing it. But the other thing is really, I think the big paradigmatic change, which already has, that's why I'm emphasizing it, that Jane Jacobs pointed out in 1961, and we haven't still fully acknowledged, is this paradigmatic change into thinking of cities as systems and complex systems. And I think actually we have missed so far a lot of the opportunity that digitalization opens for addressing this, because digitalization actually opens the opportunity to describe, analyze, and visualize cities as complex systems. But often we don't use it for that. We still push this digitalization back into the old, rather static ideas about what cities are. But there is a seed there that we could use much more efficiently. And I think we should, because it opens exactly for addressing the true problem.
Yeah, with data.
Data,
Instead of what
yes.
I feel or what I think.
Yes. And also that you can put it in a model that shows these systems' effects.
Yeah, together.
Yeah. So if you have, so you can understand, if I make a change over here,
What happens?
what happens over there, and all of that. At the moment, we just cut out a piece and think that we can put something in there, or take something out and then put something else in, and whatever. But at the moment, you cannot see this. But in the digital models are perfect for this, and all the data we now have and all of that. So we could see these effects, and it's not super complicated. It's just around the corner, but instead we choose to turn it to the other corner, around the other corner, I think.
That we are like more in our comfort zone and less
maybe.
work, and we maybe sometimes we don't want to face the reality and afraid of seeing that the problems that we have. Or
I think maybe if you developed it, you could make an argument from from an economic point of view, and if you're short-term interested in economic gains, you don't want to get into these big structures and the long-term investments and all of that. You just want to get your building built and get out, right?
Exactly.
And then, so that's not helping.
Yeah. I love to ask you also about Professor Carlos Moreno's 15-minute city concept. What is your take about it? Do you think?
I'm not so sure. I'm not familiar to his ideas. Can you?
Yeah, it's you plan your city so you can access your daily needs, functions like school, healthcare, workplace, and so on, within 15 minutes walking and or biking.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. You mean Paris? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And now I'm with you. I think that's what cities always have done, and it's I haven't followed that discussion so much, because I've been thinking that, well, that's exactly what we have always built, but I think there's certain risk there that so I mean in fundamentally I totally agree.
Yeah.
But I think it's much more complex, because 50 minutes from where and so forth, you easily could draw the conclusion that, for instance, Vällingby or something in Stockholm, the perfect neighborhood from the 50s, is exactly that kind of a 15-minute. And it's not where, if you're in periphery of that, it's not 15 minutes to everything, right?
No.
So you have to have a continuity of 15.
Of 15, 15.
Yes, and then there are certain things that it also. So that's one risk, that you can think that you can create an object that's called the 15-minute city, and then you can plant it all. And that's exactly what we did in the 50s.
Yeah.
And I think it's problematic. It has the idea of a static not the complex idea of the city, complexity idea of the city. But I don't think that's probably the argument here. It's more developed than just saying that we could do that. The other risk is, of course, that we get stuck in this neighborhood thinking, what you can reach in 15 minutes, you
Yeah.
know, the very close and everyday things. But where should the opera house be, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if the need is to create a lot of continuity of 15-minute
Like a
cities.
network of
Yeah, so
streets.
that on another scale supports, let's say, a 15-minute city by bus or by public transport of
Mm.
some kind. But then you have a much larger thing, right?
Exactly.
But then you get something in the center of that. You get
Mm.
a big, I don't know, department store or maybe a art center or something, right? And then you could even add to that some commuter trains or something, or cars.
Yeah.
And then 15 minutes or something, or maybe more, 20, 30 minutes. And then in the center of that, you would get an opera house, right? But when you just say 15 minutes and you often talk about walking, you
Yeah.
get these neighborhoods. And that's we often embrace that so much. But you have, I think another threshold we have to pass is to be interested in building the big city. The big
The
city,
entire,
yeah, not only, and understand it. So it's not. It's often, you know, we loved. Oh, it's so nice and so. But we don't. We're kind of hesitating to build or accept the big city.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really where we can start to integrate and do more interesting. Also in economic terms, we can specialize. I can be an urban morphologist. You know, how many cities in Sweden would hire an urban morphologist? Not a 15-minute city, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's have to be it's a larger, and that you can have a podcast like this. You cannot have that in any city, and well, maybe because you're on the air, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. I understand. So let's say people working in urban planning and design, when they read your book, where do you want them to act? What is your call to action? How will they use it?
Yeah, I have to. Maybe there are three aims, but
Yeah.
the first is this we talked a lot about. I think I hope it can be an impetus for practice to increase, actually, what I would say, the theoretical basis for the practice. You know, the definition of a profession is that you have it's a practice based on a disciplinary theory. And I'm trying really to develop and contribute to that disciplinary theory. For instance, saying you should think about cities as systems and not as a series of objects, right? And systems in that sense is there are. Then you have to go a little bit deeper in that, just to say that it's kind of nice relation and so
Yeah.
forth. You have to go a little bit deeper. So that's one thing. But there's another aim, is that I think our field, the built environment, is maybe it's underestimated in our own area of practice and so forth, but it's also underestimated in academia, in other disciplines.
Okay.
You know, many of the social sciences are becoming, you know, it's not sociology or economics anymore. It's much more urban economics, urban sociology, or even urban ecology, urban. So what do they mean by urban? Well, it demands a particular built environment that sets people in a new relation to each other and make it possible to live much closer to each other.
Yeah.
Not denser, I don't think it's closer. That creates quite different opportunities and processes, social processes, economic processes, ecological processes. But many of these disciplines are not very good at describing the built environment. So here we have an advantage.
Yeah.
Our field, as an academic field, let's say urban design, architecture, urban morphology, and so forth, is I find extremely important to these disciplines. If you want to do studies in urban sociology, you really need to describe the built environment where these urban social processes are taking place, or you will be lost, I think.
Yeah.
So this is the second. So there is a large part in the book trying really to engage with these disciplines. which I don't know if they are interested in hearing the message, because I probably, but I'm
Yeah.
trying really. So
Yeah.
that's the second.
Second, yes.
The third one would be maybe more political in the sense that, where is really value created in society? And I would, in short, make the argument that much more of the value lands in land, or what I call
Yeah.
spatial capital, than we acknowledge today. And that even makes it difficult to make a really hurtful critique of the current, economic system. It's a lot of talk, about, how much people make, Elon Musk is making, and of course, and so forth. But there is a lot, obviously, so much money landing in land. So you should go to the landowners and really say that, because I think that's on a very deep level are the true beneficiaries of the current economic systems. But we don't see them because, we look at the building and not on the land or the location.
Yeah, yeah.
So we think that it's, by constructing all kind of technology and so forth, that we are where the money is made. And of course it is. But
the value.
Yeah, I think I think to create a more fundamental critique, you need to address land.
Yeah.
And, it's often pointed out that Karl Marx, he obviously had this, fight between labor and capital, or capitalists and laborers. But it's often pointed out he never really got the third production factor into his big
Model,
idea, land. And he kind of, no, it's not land, it's not, it's this thing. Because he was, Hegelian or whatever, it was his fight by opposites.
Yeah.
So the third thing didn't fit in.
Yeah.
But I think it's the hidden thing between this. Actually, if you would for a moment talk Marxian, you said this dialectics between labor and capital.
Yeah.
It's obviously a fight and has been.
Yeah.
But when you have that duality, there's a hidden third. And what is that third? It's land.
It's land, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So your book is in English.
Yes.
And now it's also available. That's very good. And we can order it.
It's in all regular
bookstores
and so forth. But it will be also open access.
Open, okay.
Yeah, so that's great. So it will be, and I don't really know if it's already now or if it'll be a little later. I don't know. I need to talk with MIT Press about that.
Okay,
so I understand it fully. But so yes, I find that very, very good. So it will be easy to access. Yes, yes.
Which book number is this one you're writing?
A book number?
Yeah, like you wrote how many books here?
No, I haven't written that many books. I had this other Städerna Stenar that was quite... But we have quite a few others coming also from our research group and other colleagues in research. So there's one coming on something that we call... It's more from the practice side, where we combine traditional urbanism with ecosystems, particularly, that we call social ecological urbanism. So the working title is Principles of Social Ecological Urbanism, and it's more from a really, and it's much more strong. We have strong contributions from, in simple term, the ecology side, so to speak. So that's very exciting. But we're also working on a more methodological book in our research group at Chalmers, Spatial Morphology Group, SMOG. So I'm doing that together with my colleagues Meta Berghauser-Pont and Jana Stavroulaki to make a book on how you can develop two methodologies to do these analysis and so forth.
Interesting.
So it's lots of things.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you share your thoughts with us. And as you know, in this podcast, two parts. First part about technology, and the other part more about people behind technology. So more like about you and your life and career and thoughts. So we also inspire each other as well and inspire our listeners. I'd love to know more about you. If you can take us back in time, tell us where you grew up, what did you study, how was like your life journey.
Well, I think I'm very much a product of the Swedish welfare state, and I'm actually kind of hinting at that in introduction to the book,
Yeah.
that I actually come from a family that really does not have an academic background at all. In that sense, I was the first to even, I don't know how you say it, even took like studentexamen or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't have that kind of academic. So I followed the Swedish system. In Sweden we have a system. So you
Yeah.
go to the syo-konsulent. The one that advises you on what your kind of work you could do
Yeah.
when you finish
The
high school.
supervisor. The
Yeah.
supervisor.
So, and I read all these, and then I found that this. Architecture. That sounds fantastic. I didn't know. Okay, I had no background in that and so
No.
forth. But this lovely. You do all these kind of things, and I also like this more artistic and drawing, and that's so. Wow, that is great.
Mhm.
But and I truly enjoyed starting at the school. It wasn't really at studying; it was just having fun and having
Which
all these
school was it?
projects. At School of Architecture at KTH.
Yeah.
So it was just we worked in groups and did drew things and everything.
Okay, so you
But
didn't see it as like a school and you need to study. It was more like a lab
no,
and fun and joy.
yeah, there was long nights and all of that. I mean, but I realized later on, that I chose actually. I need to say this, that I chose actually what was not really an academic education. I think we read 3 books in 4.5 years,
Was
right?
a lot of studios.
Yeah, it's just so it
Yeah.
was a craft school, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's and now I think it's changed a lot,
A lot, yeah.
but still not
Mm.
all the way.
Mm.
And maybe it cannot be turned into a
Theory, yeah.
typical
Yeah.
academic development. But I think there was very little, was lacking a theoretical base, and I could sense that already then. The suggestion was, well, this, if you had done
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
try again, or maybe you could do like this, or
Yeah.
so then you never quite understood what's
Like why?
why,
Yeah.
right? So I later understood that maybe because I sensed that I have that kind of a more traditional academic interest. So after
Yeah.
spending all going, okay, I didn't really go through an academic education.
Ah,
And so when one starts also doing a PhD, you realize that,
okay.
there's
a
so
serious.
little I haven't, no clue about.
Was it difficult
It
to,
was
to
difficult.
to shift from like more practical and handcrafting to like reading and writing papers and
Yeah, but I liked that. So
Mm.
I didn't have problem in reading and so forth. But one realized that you have no really discipline in it, right? So
Mm.
it's kind of, I can read that, I can do that, I can.
Mm.
So it was very hard in that sense. And, you haven't, normally in many other disciplines, you would have trained this
Yeah.
already.
So
And
you're
now we
ready.
do that much more in the educations of architecture.
Yeah.
We have much more of that. But at that time, it was really from nothing to, which also makes you maybe formulate things
Another
that
type
were
of
just unrealistic. I'm going to write the thesis on.
Yeah. What did you research first, like when you did your PhD?
But my entrance to that was really why first of all, I found this urban level, that scale, much more exciting than buildings after a while. It
Yeah.
is because it has this close relation to societal issues
Mm.
and so forth. But
Mm.
our issue at that time, this is way back in the 80s, was, why, when now the traditional city has become popular again, and one is trying to develop, the modernistic approach.
Yeah.
Why is it still not working? Because we so as students we criticized areas like Södra Station or
Yeah.
later Hammarby Sjöstad and these
Mm.
cases
Mm.
that were supposed, and then you go
It
there and you
didn't
say
work.
it's not
No.
working.
No.
So that was my question. So my critique was
Ah.
not really a critique of modernism; it was a critique of what came later, that neither works. So it's
Mm.
obviously you need to go somewhat deeper.
Yeah.
So that was my, so to speak, research question, which was rather large.
Yeah. And you continue your career within academia, or did you also do some practice?
Yeah, I continued and have been there since. At 10 years ago, I moved to Chalmers. But also early on, the kind of analysis we were doing was also people from practice started to ask, can't we?
Yeah.
We think that seems interesting. We could try that over in our so in various rather soon I started a consultancy called Spacescape,
Yes.
which today is world famous.
Uh,
But not so much due to me, but also the gang around Alexander Ståhle that
yeah.
has done tremendous
Of
work.
course.
But
Shout out.
I was there in the beginning. It started because I saw these connections,
Yeah.
and I thought if this is really the way to make an argument for this field of research
Yeah.
when
Then.
it is obviously demanded.
Yeah.
So I feel very proud of being part of creating a market for architectural services in
Yeah.
practice, because now it's everywhere, but it was not.
No.
So
No.
we
I
were
can
very
imagine.
happy when thing, not Sweco, it wasn't called Sweco, or not Afro, but
Yeah.
Ångpanneföreningen started to be
Yeah.
you know,
Interested in
or
this.
later Rumbles and all of these
Mm.
started, maybe we could do this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a market segment
You
created
created.
from architectural research
Mm.
that I think many have moved into.
Yeah.
Probably also inspired by Gale and so
Of
forth.
course.
But
Of course.
but
But also shout out to Alexander. I love him.
yeah,
So no, but like you created this kind of service.
yes, at least was
In
part of
Sweden.
that. But I think I because it was very unusual that architectural research could do that. So yes,
Mm.
so that's I'm proud of that.
What gives you energy to continue your passion within city planning and spatial and so on?
I think I just find this extraordinary interesting how this world of what of our worlds as humans, like we sit here meeting people,
Mm.
all these things also have a material side, very physical
Yeah.
dimension,
Yeah.
and that it's in many and I find that interesting, that kind of play between that, so to speak, dead matter
Mm.
and so I find just that questions around that to be very, very exciting.
Mm.
So it's kind of a, you could almost say that it's kind of, it has certain archaeological approach in a sense. You know, what can we understand from the physical material
Yeah.
about actual life?
Mm.
And in the end, I think we make a mistake when we separate these, because what we do is that we just, you know, project things of ourselves
Mm.
into material things to support us in the next step. In that
Mm.
sense, it's similar to the capital
Yeah.
concept,
Yeah.
embodied labor,
Mm.
but it could be embodied culture, embodied social
Mm.
structures, embodied whatever, markets,
Yeah.
because we do this all the time, but we kind of not acknowledge this. You know, we have this very individualistic idea that we totally isolated as
Yeah.
humans.
But it's not true.
No,
Like.
of course, we're part of other people, so we're part of a
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
environment, but we're also part of a physical environment, right? And the physical environment is creating structures for the social environment,
Also.
and then also create us as individuals.
Exactly.
Because of course we are individuals, but we're part of these other things,
Mm.
and that whole thing is so exciting.
So for you, it's this like the complexity of this ecosystem somehow with the like hardware, the software, the hardware,
Exactly.
like you're exciting about it.
Yes, I find
Uh,
that very, very.
yeah.
Uh,
And in your long career, I have two questions also for this. Um, you name something you did and you're very proud of,
mm.
and something you did. Maybe if you go back in time, you will redo it in another way.
Yeah, as I said, but the truly. I'm also proud that I said that this market segment, at least being part of creating that, to show how architecture research can be relevant for practice, and even, you know, you can make money out of it and so
Thanks.
forth. But the other side is maybe in more academic terms, I'm very proud of, because I think it's not so usual. Maybe colleagues at the schools may argue against me, but I think really it's rather um, uncommon that, well, because what I've tried to develop at both Chalmers and KTH is not a series of research projects, but a subject area
Mm.
of architectural research. And I normally call it spatial morphology.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, I'm not inventing it from scratch, but I think we together with colleagues, we tried to develop it as a very particular field that that is not tied to individuals or current issues, but it's something that we need to develop knowledge on in architecture over time, and it's
Yeah.
always been there, and it will continue to be there.
Okay.
And in that sense, I'm quite proud that at the moment, for instance, at KTH we have Ann Legeby who's
Yes.
carrying this on,
Yeah.
doing it in her own way, and so forth, as a professor in applied urban design there.
Yeah.
And at Chalmers, our group is now led by Meta Berghauser Pont, professor in urban design, has she become. So I'm very proud of, created something that
Staying
can
alive
continue.
and continue.
Exactly. That it's not, because you have a lot of these things that kind of connected to individuals and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just hope now that the schools of architecture, both at KTH and Chalmers, will realize the value of that. Not the individual
Not
papers
names
published
yes,
or
yes.
the individual projects concluded, but that they have a platform
Yeah.
with the methodological support. It has a theoretical basis and so forth that you could continue to develop
Exactly.
over long term
Yeah.
and help establish architectural research as a true academic discipline in that sense. Because if you're just part of a lot of projects all over the place,
You're not well established.
No, exactly. And I think also then that the next step would be to make other disciplines realizing that this field, like spatial morphology, would be something for an urban sociologist, for instance, to really get involved with.
Interesting.
So,
Then it's like the ecosystem is getting bigger and bigger.
So that's if this is true, and of course this is happening in other places too. But so that is something I'm proud of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And something you did in the past, and now if you go back in time, you will redo it in another way.
Yeah, probably many things. But if there was to be something larger, maybe at some stage. I think I should maybe have tried to move outside of Sweden
Okay.
to find another academic environment. Also because it's and see maybe also get more resistance and arguments against what you're saying.
Okay.
Because still Sweden is rather small, so it's maybe you get away with too much too easy. And maybe, but it could also be inspiring. So maybe that, because I think maybe one could have also realized, oh yeah, I need to think about this twice. That's maybe making it
it's
too
more
simple.
like to challenge yourself more.
Yes, and get also that kind of an atmosphere.
Yeah.
When we have had some, for instance, in contacts with the School of Architecture at Yale, and that's the School of Architecture. But when you walk around that university, and we have visited, the Department of Sociology, Economics, not least ecology or forestry, or
Tough,
it's
huh?
fantastic. No, but it's inspiring.
Also,
it's inspiring.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
So what is success for you? How do you define success for you now after so many years?
Well, maybe what I've already talked about, that I think it's successful if things can continue and work, so to speak, without me.
Okay.
So in that sense, and I'm not saying that I'm the reason for it. So that's again why I'm happy for what's happening at KTH with Anne, and also Daniel Koch is a very important part.
He was my professor.
Both
of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course I forgot to say, and what Meta is doing at Chalmers with the group, and Anne is doing, and Daniel is doing at KTH. So I'm very happy because that, even though they go in other directions, I feel part of it. But also Spacescape, even though Alexander is a fantastic person, I was there to start to kick it off. So these things I maybe can find as success. Yeah, it works.
So you create, or you're part of creating some system that's continue to work.
I like to think of it like that anyway. But so if that would be successful, I think then the machine, so to speak, works.
Yeah, without you.
Yes.
Okay, last question before we we go to the last part of this episode, and it's about the future, like 100 years from now in the future. What do you want to leave behind you? What do you want people to say about you when they read your name or your systems that you created? What do you want to leave behind you?
Yeah. Uh, if people talk about me in 100 years, that's doubtful. But it is this. I think I see that there is two major challenges in what I've been
Yeah.
working on. On the one hand, contributing to making practice primarily in urban design, but broadly in planning, maybe architecture and so forth. But urban design, stadsbyggnad. You know that these
Yeah.
concepts are difficult, right? I mean, talking, all the definitions. There's so many, but stadsbyggnad,
Yeah.
urban design. To make that step into accepting it as a kind of or acknowledging that you're dealing with what's called a complex system, so to
Mm.
speak, which often makes it sound more complex than it
Yeah.
is also. So but it's not. So if one has contributed to that
Mm.
through the research that is proving to be relevant for practice or through Spacescape and
Mm.
other things, I find that, and if people would somehow see that I was part of that, that would be great.
Yeah.
The other thing, which I think maybe is more work to do, is to acknowledge a field like the spatial morphology area.
Mm.
Of course, it's combination urban
Yeah.
morphology, space syntax, all kinds of things that we try to bring
Yeah.
together, and that would be acknowledged from other disciplines than our own, as maybe we should
Yeah.
do this
Collaborate.
instead. If that would be,
Yeah.
if that would happen, if one could contribute to that, which actually this last book is
Mm.
very much about,
Great.
then that would be fantastic.
To leave behind.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so last part of this episode, it's about 3 takeaway messages.
Mm.
First one is that you give a message to yourself.
Mm.
What is your message to yourself?
Sorry, in the future or
Now, if you imagine you stand in the front of the mirror, what do you tell yourself? What is the message to you?
um, this was difficult. Sorry, I didn't check this. um, um, Maybe I mean then let's so I can be a little bit personal. Maybe
Yeah,
then I could say that maybe you're often very highly critical of yourself. Oh, I shouldn't do that, and then so maybe. But I
like
think I would
less.
need that somebody said that you're doing all right.
Yeah, but yeah, you're doing
It's
great.
okay.
You're
It's okay.
doing
Thank
great.
you, Mustafa.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
Like so,
Exactly what I need to
let's
hear.
be less self-critical.
Yeah. Maybe a little.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a message to students who are studying architecture, urban planning, or urban design.
This is easier, and this is something I try to convey when we have teaching or when lecturing and so forth. That I really think that obviously we're living in a crazy world, and it's increasing. But even before the more recent developments, that a lot of these crises that we are facing, they are in the right field. They could make a difference here, and this is truly important. That this, if we put it like that, this technology of the built environment really is something that can change both many of the social, or be part of contributing to a solution, I should say,
Yeah,
that of the many social environmental crises that we see. So it's a truly exciting field. But I think, yeah, so that's what in brief, what I would say. uh, Adding also because that it's because the built environment's role in all these very complex systems that may be going in the wrong direction, what the built environment contributes is creating resilience. We touched on that. You
yeah,
had that on the because actually the built environment in itself is not a complex system. It's it's rocks put on rocks, right?
yeah.
It's a
Material.
bricks and mortar. It's not complex. It's a very, but because of that very reason, and it's long term, it's slow. It's a very slow
Yeah,
variable. It creates stability in these fast-moving systems of economics and
Yeah.
social. And at the moment, that system is creating resilience in a system that we don't really want, right? So unsustainable,
Yeah.
unequal, unenvironmental
Mm.
friendly, all of these things. So, but by changing that, we could create resilience in a more, a kind of the kind of directional systems that we
Yeah.
would like to see. And this is so. This is why the built environment is so fundamental in all of this. So it's the one that creates stability in these. In parentheses, this also means the resilience is not necessarily a good thing in itself, because what we're fighting at the moment is the resilience of an unsustainable system. You see it everywhere. You try to change it. No, it fights back. You try to change it, it fights back.
Yeah.
And the built environment, for instance, having developed a car-friendly structure, will always fight back, because how am I not quitting my car because I need it to get to work, right? So of course I take my car. So you have to change this, otherwise it will not change. But this is also why it's so important. And so that I really think that the students, even though it's not high tech, even though it's not all that kind of unsexy, it's not the highest pay, you work with at the public office maybe, but it's so important.
Yeah. So don't change the program.
No.
To study, I don't know what, but okay. Last message to us working in the field. Could be practitioners. What is your takeaway message to us?
It's in a bit similar, of course. So all these are the students, because the students start working with you later on. So it's the same thing. This is so important. So also this, it's not only urban design, architecture, and building, so forth. It's the whole samhällsbyggnads area, the urban development area, like AFRI and so forth. It's because it creates the fundamentals of society. So it's of course obviously important. But again, I think we're rather bad at explaining why it's so important and why it also demands more knowledge development and all of that, because so that's part of it. But I think that the other one is that I really, and now I'm talking more urban design because I don't know the whole range of things. But then I would say that I think it would be to take this step into a more systems thinking, because it's a paradigmatic change. The object you're working with becomes something else. And it has always been this something else. So the ones that can embrace that and be good at that, I think will have a very good future, both in the sense that one will produce things that are more helpful for society, and we will lessen the mistakes that we're doing. But of course, if you're like AFRI, you're also on the market, so to speak, I think you could be very successful as a company. But then you really need to embrace this fully.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Professor, I really enjoy our conversation, and thanks a lot for giving your valuable time to come here to share also thoughts and stories. Keep up the good work.
I'm so happy to be here. This was really one of the best discussions I've had of this format. So really, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.